Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Kerry Ann and I am part of Equilibrium Collective, and I'm being joined this evening with my co-host Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
And this evening we've been quite fortunate to be able to catch up with David Saunderson from Spooky Isles. So welcome, David. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kerry Ann. Hi, Sarah. Hope you're both well tonight.
Very well, thank you. So usually we like to start off our discussions, if we have a guest, is find out a little bit about them and how they come about their journey. So would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself and Spooky Isle, please? Oh,
Okay.
Spooky Isles, sorry.
Spooky Isles, that's fine. Well, just so people don't know, the Spooky Isles, we're a London-based website that focuses on ghosts, horror, and dark history within the British Isles or within the UK and Ireland. We've been running since 2011, and we basically are an online magazine which is free. We have lots of guest writers, people that are passionate about the paranormal, about horror films, about folklore, all the cool things that we've got here in the UK. And I founded the online magazine back then because I felt that I wanted something that was British and Irish. There's a lot of paranormal stuff out there which takes stuff from all over the world. A lot of it's American, which is fine, and and there's some stuff obviously coming out of America and other parts of the world. But I wanted something that was really focused on UK. We've got the best hauntings, we've got the best haunted castles. Ireland, Scotland, and Wales have got the best folklore, and I just really wanted to focus on that. It's the thing that I like living here in London. I like the fact that in non-COVID times, I can go to a pub that is hundreds and hundreds of years old, almost 1,000 years old in some cases, and have alleged hauntings, and you just go there and you've got all you want. So I just felt when I first came to the UK, I'm Australian, if you've not already realised, and when I first came here, I started up a little blog which was almost like David's travel adventures, and I thought, well, no, I want to do this about going to cemeteries and going to different sort of haunted pubs and Tower of London and going on a Jack the Ripper tour and all these type of experiences that we all love, and I wanted to write about them. So I thought, well, no, it's not going to be davidsaunderson.co.uk. That's very self-indulgent, and no one's going to give a crap about that. So I changed it to Spooky Isles because it's the Isles, the British Isles, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, and I wanted it to be it's spooky. So I founded that. I started writing up articles myself through social media. I met lots of people. They got involved. Now we've got editors and writers all over the world that write for us regularly, and that's what you see today when you go to www.spookyisles.com. You'll see thousands of articles about people that are passionate about the paranormal and horror culture here in the UK, and that's that basically is Spooky Isles in a nutshell.
Well, I've been quite fortunate to experience some, because you do so much. You don't just do your online magazine, you do reviews as well. I've been to some lectures that you have organised as well, and you do some fantastic tours as well. You said haunted pubs. You actually do tours of haunted pubs as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we do, and of course this is all before the pandemic. We do run. So we do lots of different types of tours and different kind of experiences here in London and throughout the home counties. We support people in other areas, but to be fair, we can't. And I've been all over Britain myself and looked at an Ireland and looked at pubs and stuff like that. But here we regularly just catch up for a beer or a drink at some pubs here. There's lots and lots of haunted pubs. I could probably, I know there's at least 30 because we've got an article on the Spooky Isles saying, London's 30 haunted pubs, but I know there's more than that. And some are good, some are not so good. Some are easy to get a seat in. I don't know what that'll be like from now on, but whether you get a seat in them or they'll be, what they'll be like for those kind of things. But yeah, no, and we run a meetup group called Spooky London, We could also join through Facebook, and it's all essentially free. The only time it's not free is when we have some expert guides. A lot of good friends of mine, Trevor Bond, John Kaneko James, Anthony Lewis, and a lot of others who are experts in their fields of occult, crime, paranormal, come along sometimes and give us expert tours, and that takes their time, and they're professionals. So we throw some dough their way. So we ask people that are coming along to those to pay, but mostly it's done for free, and that's it's just about having fun, really. And at the end of the day, I started this for my own entertainment, so I'm not planning to get rich by it. I'm planning to have as much fun as possible, and and that's what I'm about.
That's a really good essence to have. No matter what you do, as long as you're enjoying it, it doesn't feel like work, does it? So that's really, really good. I wanted to, sorry, I don't want to blame Sarah. I wanted to ask, well, one of the things that I did come along to was your lecture, and I come along to the lecture about Rosalind, the investigation of Rosalind and Harry Price. Harry Price is something that is a person that I'm quite interested in, just because of really the fundamentals of him and who he is and where we are today. But the lecture that I went to was about Rosalind. But you with Harry Price in particular, you hold. There's been other lectures as well, isn't there?
We have, yeah. When you call it a lecture, I do remember when I first met you, Kerry Ann. It was at the Society of Psychical Research, and it actually just happened to be there because it was actually the launch of Paul Adams' fantastic book, The Enigma of Rosalie. Now, and Paul Adams is a friend of mine, and he asked me to come along and basically help with the launch, promote it through the spooky hours. It was a fantastic. So I was kind of just there to say, hey, everyone, take your seats. So I'm not going to take any kind of credit for that, but it was a fabulous night. And the story of Rosalie is magnificent. Knowing that I was coming on tonight, and I thought we probably will mention that just because, I was thinking, what will I talk about? And, Rosalie is a very interesting case, as is Harry Price. Rosalie was one of Harry Price's more controversial cases. He, in 1937, apparently went to a medium, what do you call when they sit around a table? A seance. Went to a seance somewhere in London, and as part of that seance, a 6-year-old child. What's the opposite? It's obviously late in the day. What's the opposite of vanish?
Apparition.
Apparition. Yeah. But I suppose a ghost of a child, a 6-year-old child who died 15 years earlier, sort of appeared. I'll say appeared. That's like, I'm trying to work out more of a spooky way of saying it, but appeared, and apparently Harry Price was taken with this as evidence of finally evidence of the afterlife, and that there was no doubt that this was real. But as we later learn, there's a lot more to the story, and it's been rather controversial over, say, the last 80 years. Now, lots of debunking. People after Harry Price died, people said he was a liar, he was a fraud, he was all sorts of things. And but Paul Adams, who was a close friend of Peter Underwood, who was a very famous parapsychologist, I wouldn't say parapsychologist, ghost hunter, and he was able to use a lot of the documents that Peter had collected. He had some of Harry Price's own documents and evidence from different investigations, and Paul's was able to put together a fabulous study of the Rosalie case, to the point where he was actually able to track down where the seance happened. It was never sort of said, because Harry Price never said where the seance happened. It happened somewhere in London, but he left enough evidence that Paul, essentially in a magnificent effort of sleuth work, like going through things from birth records and all sorts of things, just absolutely, literally going through a haystack and looking for a pin, he was able to find the building. And funnily enough, the building is not very far from where I live here in central London, and I walk past it each day, which is a bit spooky. But so that's one of the kind of things that I think is quite cool about living in London, that you can live near quite interesting places, and whereas in other parts of the world, I'm sure they're interesting, but they're certainly not historic like a seance like Rosalie.
Because in the actual in Harry Price's write-up with what happened, he doesn't actually disclose anything, does he? He doesn't disclose the location of his findings. He doesn't really let on to who and where, really.
Yeah, I think you're probably a bit more up to the date with the story as I was, because as I say, it was 2017 we had that launch, and I was quite into the story back then. I've got the book out just today, and I've just started to reread it, and I've just got past the introduction, so I should have probably done that 3 weeks ago, and I could have told you the rest of the story. But from that conversation and through the talk that Paul gave at the Society of Psychical Research that night back in 2017. You can just tell, it's a gripping story, and anyone who's interested in Harry Price or the UK or just the paranormal in any case really needs to read that book. I'll come back another day and tell you more about it once I've actually finished reading the book, or rereading the book, I should say.
Yeah, it was because that was the same time that I actually learned about the Mongoose story as well. There were so many different things that, as well as talking about Rosalind, there was more things that we did that really didn't come to light after Harry Price's passing, like you said. The one thing that I did come across after that, because at the time I knew of Harry Price because of obviously the things that we do kind of is a little bit underpinned by a lot of his work. But I never really knew in detail until I come across Eddie Brazil with the Borley Rectory as well.
It is a great man, yes.
Yes, he is. He is lovely. But
That's right. I would say he is a great.
So with the Borley Rectory, sorry, I think there's like a little bit of a delay. Sorry. With the Borley Rectory, obviously I was able to find some bits and pieces about it, but I would love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on that.
I mean, I've got the same. I mean, I've spoken to Eddie about it at length. I've spoken to Paul Adams at length because they both wrote a book about Borley Rectory with Peter Underwood years ago, and so they are leading experts on Borley. So I mean, anything they say, I would just take. That's right. Then I'll just agree with them straight out. I think it's an interesting story. I think it's a story that wouldn't go amiss on one of these sort of like Emmerdales or EastEnders. It's full of family drama and scandal, and chuck in a few ghosts to go with it. I recently spoke to the director of the Borley Rectory film, and I'm going. I'm gonna just wait. Just bear with me. I'm sorry about this. I should have not say his name because he's a tremendous bloke. Ashley Thorpe, who was actually at the again. He's the one that did the painting on the front of the Enigma of Rosalie book. So everything leads back. It's all quite incestuous and quite. Everyone knows each other. He did a film a few years back about Borley Rectory where Paul and Eddie were significant consultants on him, and I just think anyone who really goes in depth into Borley can't help love it because it's just one. I said it has all the hallmark. It has ghosts, but it's the classic English ghost story. You're talking about nuns, ghostly apparitions on the in a churchyard. And it's very much the old, ghosts going through walls or ghosts walking sort of half bodies across floors, because obviously beforehand when they were around, that floor was at a different level. So it's all the kind of sweet stuff that we enjoy from reading our sort of Hamlin Book of Horrors and ghosts from our childhoods. That is Borley Rectory. Borley Rectory is fun for the whole family. It's but it does have the a bit of sex and scandal as well. So it's good for after 9 as well.
For good measure. I'll let Sarah. Have you got any questions?
No, I was getting really absorbed into what he was saying. So you were saying about having various places of interest on your doorstep. I think that's something that some people can take for granted, maybe, or maybe they don't realise. How important do you feel it is for people to look up their local history and to find out about the different stories?
I think it just gives it a little bit of extra fun, knowing that when I do, we're all going to do our little walks at the moment. We're sort of getting out of lockdown, but who knows? We may well be back in it soon enough. We go for our walk in the morning, myself and my wife, and we walk past a number of houses in the area that I live, and there's a few blue plaques in London. We have a few blue plaques. A lot of them are boring. A lot of them are sort of some architect or some. It's mostly architects for some reason. They have lots of blue plaques around here. But every now and then, if you look up where people lived, you can find this house is where Boris Karloff, the horror actor, lived, or Christopher Lee, who lived right next door to him, not at the same time, but again, that's not very far. You've got like Oscar Wilde is in Chelsea, Bram Stoker lived in Chelsea, Mary Shelley lived in Belgravia, Vincent Price lived in Belgravia. By looking up and doing a bit of research, you can have a lot more fun than walking past some sort of old stone buildings. Knowing that this is where someone quite famous lived in the past, and I just think that just enriches, and it enables you to understand better how they lived their lives. So knowing that they lived there, they would have had to walk to the station similarly to the tube station that you might have. So it just gives me, I feel, a better connection to maybe some of those historical characters, knowing that they, essentially they had to do the same thing I do. You can't, no one's carrying them to the tube station. They had to walk, so they walked across the same street as I, or they maybe went to that same pub. Presumably, as I said before, not presumably, but obviously, Harry Price walked down the same street and was standing there in front of that house where Rosalie was. So it's just kind of cool, and I just think anyone who's interested in the paranormal should understand the area around them, because it'll actually educate them in what was actually happening, and knowing that this pub might be say 300 years old, but underneath it was a former monastery or something like that, is kind of cool, and that's why it's haunted. Not because it was a pub; it's because there was a monastery under it, which I understand is the reason why there's a pub called the Hoop and Toy in South Kensington, not far from the South Kensington tube station, and that's why the Hoop and Toy is seen as a haunted pub, because of what happened, not at the pub, but because there's ghosts of monks there, because there was a monastery there. So knowing that makes it more, makes your beer taste better, I reckon. I don't know, but it's just going to be it's going to be more fun.
Definitely. Going back to when you talk, it's not even going back to, actually, we were just talking about it, knowing about our history and knowing about what is on our doorstep. Things like folklore and not so much superstition, but the supernatural is a massive part of what we do. But this is something that's always been about, isn't it? Even I did actually watch your Harry Price, the video of Harry Price. It's the first time I've ever come across it. I see it on the Spooky Isles Facebook page, with Harry Price actually talking about paranormal research being an exact science. In it, he speaks about how we can trace ghost stories and superstition years and years and years back, and even further to that, when you think of Carl Jung, when he talks about the primitive man and superstition. So, do you feel that should play a massive part? I know we've spoke about it already, but when people are considering locations that they're going to, it should be a part of their research or their understanding of the location.
I mean, I think so. I think it's very difficult, because superstition is handed down by people talking to each other. Yes, if you get a researcher that goes into an area beforehand and collects it over the period of years, you'll find a lot of. In lockdown, I've bought quite a few books on eBay, because we're all generally bored to tears about things. So I've been looking at some really quite old books, and some I can't afford because they're just far too expensive. But there's a lot of old folklore books out there where people have been writing about the folklore of Sussex or something like that, or the folklore of Surrey, or these ones, and and I find that there's a lot of books out there that do have superstitions and folklores of different areas, but they're not really that quite accessible anymore because people, books that might have been published in the 1930s are never been republished and they just get destroyed, or people are not interested in them anymore. I find some of these books that I pick up give me little tidbits about the locations of places. There was one the other day I was reading. I forget the name of the chap who wrote it, but it's a book called Crime and Superstition, which was published in October 1934. Funnily, I can't remember the bloke's name, but I can remember when it was published. It was October 1934. And it's an old Scotland Yard copper who retired and went into, was basically writing about all his adventures. And he's talking about Jack the Ripper. And there's a bit in there where he's talking that there was, and again, I can't think of his name because I just can't think of his name, but there was a medium, a psychic medium that was brought in to do some sort of psychic work on the Jack the Ripper murders in 1888. And he claimed that he saw in his visions who Jack the Ripper was. So as part of the story in this book, Crime and Superstition, he tells the story of how this psychic medium was getting the bus from the Shepherd's Bush through central London. And when he came to Lancaster Gate, now if anyone knows this, but it's basically a very linear straight through along Hyde Park, the psychic was sitting on the bus, and as he was sitting, he came to a stop, and this bloke got onto the bus, and the psychic went white, and this is the man that he saw in his vision. This was Jack the Ripper, and he waited and waited and waited, and then he couldn't wait anymore, and he got off at Marble Arch because he was I think so horrified by the whole idea. Anyway, the point being there is, I now know that the bus stops or along that way are connected to the Jack the Ripper, the Jack the Ripper legend or mystique or whatever. And whether it's all rubbish or not, I don't care. But there's something to it. So they're the kind of things you can't get. You could knock on every single door up and down that road. No one could tell you that story. Only the person that found that out, because it's all died out. So the superstition now doesn't matter. In Ireland and Scotland and maybe some of the rural parts of England and Wales, you might still find it because people still talk about last century, or when their granny was born or their granny's granny and all that kind of stuff. But maybe in a place like London, because we're so people live in a house for like a year and then move out and move around the place, it's very difficult to get any kind of knowledge of our local area than what you're reading in a book. So I have to try harder to find this stuff, and there's a lot of people that can do it, but it essentially just takes people streaming through newspapers and old newspapers and looking through old books to try to find what are the superstitions, what is the legend of London that isn't just part of a tourist guide that's been repeated 1,000 times.
Along the lines of, I know you mentioned about rural areas. I'd done a little bit of research. I was writing an article and I'd done some research on, I found a statistic that basically said that people that live in rural areas are more likely to believe in superstition and paranormal than anyone that lives in urban areas. And that I was really interested on why that would be. The data and the statistics were really dated, but one thing that I did kind of connect it to was the fact that in rural areas you're more likely to have superstition and folklore than you are in urban. It seems, from what I found in the articles and that I'd found. So me and Sarah were having this conversation about this, and Sarah brought up a really good question. And basically Sarah was said to me that does folklore, or should folklore really be considered as part of could folklore impact paranormal investigation? Like, as a paranormal researcher, I'm asking, or an investigator, I'm asking that, like, how could a folklore and knowledge of folklore impact a person's ability to investigate or the quality of evidence? I
Yes,
think was that right?
does it influence it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how would you propose, knowing the folklore of an area, how would that influence the person doing the investigation? Would they read into things too much? Would they connect things much more freely?
I think you'll find that folklore is just, it has to start off with something, doesn't it? So it has to be, my house is haunted, or someone was, and I'll go from like folklore being the ghosty part of it rather than talking about elves or different kinds of, the sort of, the fairies and stuff like that.
Oh, we love it all.
we do love it all, but I don't know enough about that. But I'll just talk about just from the idea that folklore being is, there's a whole, you could talk about from the reason that people run around the maypole, at the start of spring, or the reason why people cut out, jack-o'-lanterns type thing. That's all sort of folklore, isn't it? It's all under that. But I'm talking about more about, like, in this little town, or in this village, we believe that, the church is haunted, or whatever it might be. Now, obviously something had to start that, even if it was just someone making it up, or someone that misunderstood something, or whatever it is. Now, might have happened once or twice, and over the years, someone says that's haunted. Then you tell your kid that's haunted. Don't go there. That's haunted. Before you know it, the whole town thinks that the church is haunted, and no one ever saw it. No one ever saw anything, but everyone believes that that church is haunted, or that that tree is magic, or something like that. So people might come in, and we're now going to investigate that church. So we believe it is haunted. So that's how people go in. They're not going in because they. I think it's always much more interesting when you're doing sort of paranormal research. You're always trying to find, where's a haunted place I can research. I want to find a place. What's a really cool place? I want to find an asylum, or I want to find some kind of I don't know, something that I know has already been haunted. So I want to go to one of these pubs in Britain that's known as a haunted place. Now, I'm going in there with the idea that it's already haunted. So, I mean, the investigation is not pure by any means, which is fine. And that's that. If you walk away and say, "Look, I found nothing, and there's nothing there that I could find, and it was all, probably it's just a folk tale," that's fine. But I just think I want to be interested if you just take any house and say, "Well, what is the normal sort of level of the paranormal is your house now?" If we got out an EVP and started playing around with meters and stuff like that, would we find anything? Because there's no folklore there. There's no preconceived notions of whether it's haunted or not. I'm just suggesting that. So that's why I think when you were saying about some of these country places, is it self-perpetuating? About why? Because the people have lived there for so long, they get to bounce it off each other, these stories. Whereas in the city, they might live there for a year, or they don't live there anymore. They can't bounce stories off each other. So it might be that's the reason why they're more likely to believe stories, because they know the people telling them. It'll be, someone's great granddad did this. I don't know. It's just, and it also could be that, and I don't know the statistics you're using, but it's sort of, I think it's more likely that the people that live in little towns or little villages and stuff like that just have family that have been there for, hundreds of years, as opposed to people who live in cities, have probably only got, a couple of generations at best in that area, never mind that house.
Yeah, that's true. That was the finding as well that we come across, that these families have lived there for years. And then you've also got the social construct of the mother being at home, the grandmother being at home, telling the stories to the children and that kind of thing. Whereas in cities, it's less likely. And obviously people from rural areas were then moving into the city and they would bring that with them. So this is what we did find. But just in general, the statistic kind of, I never ever really thought about it before until I actually thought about my own experience and where a lot of my places that I have gone to were. And I was like, actually, that's a really good point. So yeah, but I found it quite interesting. And I thought I'd ask your folklore and superstition is something that both of us are quite interested in, actually. But with
were there any particular aspects of folklore or superstition you were sort of referring to? Because I kind of see that as a sort of, yes, there are some areas that have, some geographic locations that have stories specific to them. Are there any of those you're talking about, or are you talking about just in general about,
Well,
Black cats and breaking mirrors, or
no locations.
Okay.
And what I was actually looking was, should demographic be part of our general like sweep? Should we consider demographic when we're doing research?
Absolutely, I think so. And I think people, just with ley lines and things like that, looking at where the house is compared to rivers and all sorts of things. I think just the geographic area should definitely, if you've got a house that's creaking or something like that, and you find that it's on a ley line. Now, I don't know much about ley lines, so I mean, again, that might all be rubbish as well. But from a lot of people that I respect believe in them, so there's no reason why I wouldn't want to work out how far a place was from a river or from a ley line to say this house is sitting right across some place that's supposedly spiritual, so maybe that's going to have some kind of effect on the paranormal of the area.
And also, I guess as well, I was thinking along the lines of, can we create these? I mean, I am a believer in the paranormal. I'm not going to lie, I'm a believer, but I took a little bit of I done my psychology, so I get the psychology come in and go, well, actually. So I do, the other side of things is, do we create our manifestations by like perpetuating folklore and superstition? But I digress. Sorry.
Well, you make a good. I mean, you make a good point, because I mean, we go to these haunted pubs, as part of Spooky London and Spooky Isles, and we're just going from a book. Like I'll pick up a book, or I'll look on the internet, and there'll be some tale about, yes, this pub is haunted. Now you go there, there's no evidence of it, and there's nothing suggesting. It's just that, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
And they might say, there's a barmaid, or there was a murder here, or there's supposedly a dog that barks at midnight, or something like that. That's all we have. So that is folklore, and we use that and I mean, to be honest with you, I use the angle of the haunted pub bit just because it makes it more fun. And if you're going to go to a pub, it might as well be a haunted one. So and usually they're older, and they've usually got cool pictures on the walls, and they're snuggy, and they're all quite fun. But I mean, that's all it is. So when we go to certain places that are very famous for hauntings nowadays, there's not that many of them that have a really good history of that haunting. You might have a bit to it, but if you look at generally in ghosts and hauntings books, most hauntings don't go for more than a page, and there's a reason for that, because there isn't much more to maybe the original sighting, or what was the folklore behind it that's grown up over the years. Now, in the future, with lots of paranormal groups doing investigations of famous places, that will the research from that will add to those hauntings and explain to us what's going on. But at the moment, when you go to a haunted pub in London, mostly it's just going to give you like a 3-line something. This happened here, blah blah blah. It's haunted, and some of the barmaids you talk to, or barmaids, or the waiting staff will tell you, no, there's something not right about back there. There's something funny going on, and that's what you'll get. So, which, I mean, it's cool enough for me.
Oh, me and Sarah will be going to one next year. We've got a list of things we're going to do. One of them is coming along to one of your pub tours, hopefully, if all going well. And the other one is to the lecture of Helen Duncan Smith, I think, at the Kensington College. We're going to be going along to that as well. So
Helen Duncan Smith? You mean, is there a talk on Helen Duncan?
Helen Duncan, yes, that was teamwork.
It was. It wasn't anything to do with Ian Duncan Smith. No, it's Helen Duncan, the last woman convicted or jailed for witchcraft in England. Yeah. So
I've been calling her that for such a long time.
Yeah, no. There you go. It's Helen Duncan. It's not Helen Duncan Smith. All right, there you go.
That's why I'm going to. That's why I'm going to the talk to learn. Yeah.
Funnily enough, I got I wrote an article about Helen Duncan in the Spooky Isles years and years ago, and one day I got an email from her granddaughter having a go at me because she didn't feel that her grandmother should be on a website that includes vampires and werewolves. So anyway, I wrote back. I said, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm doing this because obviously I'm interested in it, and that I feel that she was hard done by. And if you'll see the article, there's actually a link to a petition for her to be pardon, basically. And so she was happy enough with that, and she went away, happier and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so there's my Helen Duncan story for you, that her granddaughter, who must be a very old woman now, because Helen Duncan was, an old woman when she died in the 1950s. Anyway, there's my little connection there, and that's a funny thing. And sometimes in Spooky Hours, I do get sort of weird connections with people, and that's the cool thing about it, because people do find us online, and I'll get emails every now and out of the blue from people that'll like that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, we'll definitely be going along to that. We'll definitely be coming along to your tour as well. But Sarah, have you got any questions? I seem to have taken over a little bit. Sorry.
No, you're right. I'm enjoying the stories. I do love a story. I love all the folklore.
Yeah, no, it's good. So I know we've covered a lot of the paranormal, because that is really we cover paranormal, we do witchcraft and stuff like that. But one thing that I would like to kind of talk to you more about is the horror side of things, because that's something that you've got quite a lot of interest in. And I went along to the Facebook page. Obviously, I'm a follower. I have been for years. But I can see the updates of all the actors and stuff. It's really fascinating and interesting. So where did your interest in horror first started? Where did it first begin?
Oh. As a sort of a kid, you're interested in different things, and sort of I was interested in ghosts and sort of monsters and vampires and all that kind of thing. And then in about early years of high school, we had to do a project which was called the Frankenstein Project, and it was in English, and it was one of these kind of things where we had to do lots of drawings and do poems and all that kind of stuff. So I went and I found a book about Frankenstein, and it was just, funnily enough, my Frankenstein was on the television one Sunday night at 10:30 at night, and I asked my mum, could I tape it? And I just fell in love with it. I just thought, this is the best thing ever. So, and I spent basically the remainder of my high school years just taping off, videotaping everything I could of horror and reading books and stuff like that. And just as I get older, I just still love it. It's fantastic. So, and it all mixes in. There is a general connection when you're watching a film of say, sort of a Boris Karloff film where he's playing Frankenstein. Now I live around I'm not very far, about say maybe 5 minutes away from where Boris Karloff lived. I now live not far from where Mary Shelley lived. So there's all these connections between gothic horror films, ghosts, and I just think that's why it sort of works in with the Spooky Isles. I didn't want the site just to be a paranormal site. I wanted the things that people who are generally into ghosts and ghost hunting and generally into horror. It's not, we kind of are. It's not like, they'll most likely to be in sort of like into gothic type stuff. They're into ghosts, horror, possibly heavy metal. I'm not so much into heavy metal, but I quite like it, parts of it. And there'll be sort of witchcraft or, Wicca and all sorts of things. And I just think with the horror films, you've got all that. You've got witches, you've got, monsters and all the folklore and all that, and I just think that fits really nicely into the Spooky Isles, and it's just fun because you're watching horror films, you can't do much better than that. So, and I think and at the moment that's all we've got, because we can't go out to the haunted places.
This is true.
So that's my passion for the horror films, and that's how basically Spooky Isles kind of started out. Because I think the first article we did on it was, I think it was like the 80th anniversary of Frankenstein that I wrote on the Spooky Isles, and just doing reviews. I'm pretty crap at doing the reviews. I like other people doing the reviews, because I normally just say it was really good and I enjoyed it, but I hated that bit. It was crap. That's my kind of reviews. And so I'm not. I don't really like writing about them as much, but I like talking about them. So I'm quite happy to do that till the cows come home.
Okay, Sarah, do you have a question?
No. I'm not doing very well today. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So with horrors, now I find myself, I often seek them out. I like supernatural horrors and stuff like that, but they genuinely scare me to death. So I often do it whilst under a pillow or covering myself with a cardigan. If I go to the cinema to watch horror film, I always take an extra large cardigan, and I'll probably just sit like that for a while. But I always wondered, what considering horror is a kind of a bit of a phenomenon where people seek it. They actively seek it. They see it in many different forms. They see it in media. They go to the attractions, the ghost, the hunt, as in the haunted attractions, you know, that are all across the world. People seek them out. Why do you feel people do that?
I'm not entirely sure what I mean. I don't necessarily like to be scared. I like to be thrilled, and I think that's probably the same thing though, because I mean, people take it in a different way. I don't like those sort of, like I've done those sort of, like you say, those scare parks or horror parks. I don't tend to like them because I just find them off-putting. Not because there's anything wrong with them, it's just not for me. I've been to a couple that I've really liked, that I thought was fantastic, and I did have the adrenaline pumping.
Yeah.
I tend to like the horror films or the supernatural films which have a more of a spookiness to them, like there's a ghost or there's a sort of a thrilling type of ghost story going on. So that's really cool. Like I watched something on YouTube last night called Mysteries in Imagination, which was a TV series from the 1960s. There's not that many of them left because just in the 60s they deleted a lot of TV shows. But it starred Jack Hawkins as a colonel who comes back to his house in Scotland, and his son's sick in bed because he's seen what he thinks is a ghost. And the colonel goes off to check it out. It's called The Open Door, by the way. And he goes and checks out the old ruins on the estate, and he finds sort of the voice of going, "Monday, whoa," really quite creepy and scary. And I was sort of lying there in bed watching it last night, and that was quite creepy. Wasn't scared. I mean, you get scared by claps like that. In nowadays films, it's like jump scares and stuff like that. I tend to like the more creepy, and I was thinking that's really cool. They're in a they're going out at night at 11 o'clock at night, and they've all got their coats on, and they're going to find what is this ghost, and he brings a local doctor and the local vicar there to see what's going on. And I thought that was a really interesting story, and I liked it. There's a lot of rubbish on YouTube, but that was a good one. Of course, this is a YouTuber. This is fabulous.
We won't talk about that. We won't talk about that. Nice fun.
Moving along.
But I like those kind of ones, and I also like the other, horror. Some modern horror films I think are just blood and guts, and I kind of liked that when I was a kid. But if it's just like a couple of people running around getting chased by a bloke with a knife, I don't find that particularly interesting. If it's done well, it's fantastic. But I think it seems to be quite easy to do, make a film where people run around with a knife and stabbing people, and that's just a bit whatever. So that's the thing. But I don't get scared. My wife tends to get put off a little bit by them. She doesn't mind them as long as they're sort of like just creepy, scary or something like that. But she, I have to be careful. I have to sort of think when I'm about to put something on at night time, I have to juggle the idea of what's she going to think, and will I get through the first 5 minutes before she tells me to turn it off? So that's that's I don't really. I've never, and I tend to forget about them afterwards. I don't tend to get I've never seen anything where there's some films where I'll be thinking about the issues in them, and I'll think about them afterwards. But I'm not ever thinking about like I'm scarred by that. I'm not, maybe I'm just numb to all this stuff nowadays.
Maybe.
I don't know if I'm just a weirdo, but I'm really not game for all the like fictional horror. I like sourcing like real, factual, creepy stuff.
Yeah, I say that. I noticed that because you have lots of women who are into sort of like the true crime.
Yeah,
the kind of stuff you like?
Love it.
They like the true crime, and I say to my wife, she likes that kind of stuff as well. Not to any kind of weird.
It's not that we're weirdos. We're just intrigued. We're intrigued.
But she'll get scared by, or she'll get put off by a werewolf. So I say, if it's a ghost doing the murder like that, you can't stand it. But if it's a real life child getting murdered in the street, no, that's fine. And it's just like and I find that much more disturbing. I don't want to see that. I want to see a werewolf. I want to see a vampire.
I love werewolves and stuff, but I don't know. There's just something like there's a channel on YouTube called Slap Tab, and they do loads of like spooky, and they show videos of ghosts caught on cameras. Like, it just drives me. I love it.
Yeah. Definitely passionate about this. I can.
I know, it just excites me.
Yeah. See,
Nice.
I don't mind. I don't mind horror films. And I'm like David. I don't mind the true crime, but at the same time, I remember I went on an investigation once, and they took me around. I was helping out on the night, so I was one of the team leads, and they had real life actors in there with chainsaws.
Oh no.
And as we're walking around, there's a chainsaw on the floor, and I said to him, "What's the chainsaw for?" She's like, "Oh, when people go round, we have chainsaws." I was like, "Oh no, sod that." And she was like, "Wait, hold on, you're in there looking for ghosts, but you're scared of the chainsaw." But I've got less chance of a ghost cutting my arms off. The chainsaw than I have a real person. So yes, I am. So yes, I do get that. I get that a lot. But
So someone asked a question I see here. They said, asked what's number one favourite horror films. I think mine is American Werewolf in London, and that's the reason for that is that because it's just a fantastic film. It's one of the first horror films I saw when I was far too young to see it. I saw it, but accidentally bringing it home thinking it was just a comedy and didn't realise what it actually was. But and what I find cool is though you could actually go to things around London like Tottenham Court Road Station and things like that where the film's set. So that's just got everything for me. It's got it's got a cool story. It's spooky, scary. It's funny. It doesn't drag. It's always something happening in it. So American Werewolf in London is my favourite one. What is yours, Kerry Ann and Sarah? What's your favourite horror film?
Oh, you put us on the spot now.
I think my favourite ones are for all the wrong reasons. So it's the most recent ones with the Warrens, and I like them because of how
the Conjuring.
Yeah, I like them because I can go, well, that never happened. That never happened. I know that didn't happen. So that's why I like them. No other reason. And I just think the Warrens are just such a lovely couple. Of what I've known, they're just like, oh, like couple goals. That is a couple goal. So I think that's what it is as well. So yeah, that's mine.
Yeah. So you like just dismissing everything that's on the film?
Yeah, I like to go. That didn't happen. I'm safe. It's not real. It did not happen like that. That's okay. So yeah.
I remember when years ago when the Enfield haunting came on the television. I don't remember if you remember. There was a documentary about the Enfield poltergeist. It was on Sky or something like that. When I was I'm still with the Ghost Club now, but at the time I was organising events for the Ghost Club here in London, and we organised for Guy Lyon Playfair, a very famous parapsychologist who was actually one of the original was the investigator with Maurice Grosse at Enfield, and we did a talk with him, and we brought one of the producers of that thing, and basically people asking questions. It was wonderful, and the Warrens came up because the Warrens claimed to be sort of involved in the Enfield poltergeist haunting, which led to The Conjuring 2, and I mean I don't know because I'm not there, but Guy Lyon Playfair, who was actually involved in the case and has written about it, said that the Warrens basically turned up one day, was there for about half an hour, spoke to him and left. That was their involvement in it. So I just think it's funny. That's why I should watch The Conjuring 2 one day. I started to watch the first Conjuring, but I don't know what happened. I didn't get to the end of it. But it looks like fun. But well, I mean, I like they do it very well with this Annabelle stuff. It looks very, very cool. But it's a horror film. It's what it is.
Again, that's why I go. She doesn't really look like that. And I also heard the same thing regarding the Warrens. So that's why when it come on, I was like, yeah, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. So I was safe. I found my safety in that.
Okay. So when you got really scared and you thought that's just too it probably didn't happen that way. They probably weren't in the country at the time.
That's it. That's exactly my mentality when I watch it. So that's why they're my favourite. So Sarah, what's yours?
I don't really watch films because I never make it through a whole one without falling asleep. Is that really bad?
Yes.
One series that I watched and I loved, and you're going to laugh at me for this, but The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Oh my God, it was amazing.
What, the new one? The new version?
The new one on Netflix. Yeah.
I watched the first episode of it. I think it was a bit of blood and guts or something a bit.
Yeah.
I thought, bloody hell, this isn't Sabrina. This is not the,
Yeah.
It's a bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sabrina grew up.
Yeah, we don't know what happened to Sabrina, but you definitely should give it a couple more episodes because it is really good.
I'm sure it is.
I
There's
love
lots of
nitpicking on that one as well, because it's like saying like the pagans were evil. It's like, no, they're not. I'm pagan. I'm not evil.
But the triple goddess come in at the end and saved it all. So
And this is it. Yeah.
Oh, well, you've ruined it for me. I'm not watching it now.
yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Does the cat talk in it?
No.
Okay, that's boring then, isn't it?
Disappointing.
Yeah.
It
That
is.
was
Yeah,
the
that would
disappointing
just
part.
ruin the whole thing. Totally.
I was sad about that.
What other TV shows do you like? What other ghost your horror type TV shows do you like?
I watch a lot on Facebook. A lot of the local, I say local, like a lot of different teams around England, Ireland, just UK in general. Obviously there's the ones on TV like Paranormal Lockdown and all of those ones. I always schedule them into my busy diary.
Which is your favourite one though? Which ones do you like the best of the reality shows?
Yes, I think for me it's got to be Paranormal Lockdown.
And why is that?
I feel it's more relatable than some of the other ones. I think a lot of the other ones can be quite dramatised. They're quite. Do you know what I mean? Does that even make sense?
If you relate to it better, that's cool. That's
it just seems like they go into all the history of it. It's not that like it's not got too much of like spooky music and like. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
What about you, Kerry Ann? You're staying very quiet at the moment. What do you think?
I'm listening. Do you know what? I enjoy the paranormal shows, but at the same time, I kind of find them quite hard to follow. If anything, there's this one called the Ghost Loop that looks at stone tape theory and the impact that it has on a location, which I find really intriguing. That's interesting. But I think going back to the conversation we had about the the series that come out with Maurice Grosse, and I found that really good. Yeah, because I found the dynamics of the group. You were able to find out not just what happened at the location, but you was actually able to see the dynamics of the group and what they brought, and as well as what they were able to achieve. I found that quite interesting.
Funnily enough, though, when Guideline Playfair gave his talk, he was sort of criticising the producers of it because he reckoned they toned the story down. He said that much more exciting things happened than they had. He said, you have to read the book, but his book. But there's, so I just thought that was funny. So it's everything. Yeah. Nothing is what people expect or think. So
no,
I tend not. I like that. I like watching the paranormal reality shows. I think some of them are very good. I like what's it called? Great British Ghosts. It's called that.
Okay,
Michaela Strachan. I love that one. That's fantastic. I sometimes find it hard to watch the paranormal shows which are in the dark with the green lighting. It's hard to follow because a lot of people. It's just literally watching people walk around in the dark at times. So I think some of those shows are fantastic, but maybe have like 5 minutes of something worth watching. So. But when you do watch the 5 minutes, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. So we're coming up to the end of the show, but I would love to, before we go, would love to hear your most favourite ghost story today.
My favourite ghost story in what, fictional or non-fictional? Okay, I'll tell you one about this. I mean, this is one that it's a pub in London that we often go to because it's a very it's in Belgravia, so it's not very far from Hyde Park Corner. If anyone knows where that is, it's in sort of the richer area of London. So it's all like very expensive buildings, and it's right next to where the barracks used to be. They might still be there, but this is back in the sort of Napoleonic days. There was barracks there for Duke of Wellington. Had the barracks there. Now in the pub, it's called the Grenadier. It's you've probably heard of it, but you've probably definitely seen it in any kind of a ghost book about ghosts of London. It's when you go in there, you'll be surprised to see on the roof the ceiling is covered in pound notes and dollar notes, money from all over the world. And you'll ask, why is that the case? Now, the story goes that a young lieutenant I think it was a lieutenant, but it was certainly a young officer, was playing cards back in the Napoleonic era, during, back in the 1800s. And he was found cheating. And so, as you can imagine, you've got army blokes playing cards, gambling, and one of them's found cheating. They give him a slap. They beat the living crap out of him and throw him down the stairs. Now he dies, and his ghost apparently is the one that haunts the Grenadier. You'll find it on. You'll see on reality. Paranormal investigations have been done there. We did an investigation there once, but I wasn't there, so I can't talk about it. But I was in Australia at the time when Spooky London did their investigation. But when you go there, it's a very small little pub, and it's got nice sort of flowers, all the sort of things you'd expect from a sort of central London pub. But it's got a story about a ghost of a lieutenant who apparently haunts the place because he was beaten up and killed for gambling, and the people now who attend will leave some money to put on the roof to pay his gambling debts. So that's something where you can actually go in to a London pub and actually see the result of a haunting. Whereas a lot of places, they say it's haunted, but they don't make much of a deal about it. The Grenadier does. So if anyone comes to London and goes to Belgravia, I suggest they go for a pint at the Grenadier and maybe possibly put a low denomination note on the roof.
That's amazing. Is this pub part of your tour that you do as well?
I don't necessarily do tours. I don't
Okay,
do. They're not tours. We just go to a pub. Sometimes we do. Every now and then we'll do a pub crawl, which will be a small little part. This is just we do Spooky London there. Problem with it is it's very small. So some of these pubs you'd want to go by yourself or with your friend, because when we're there and you've got like 10 people, there's nowhere to sit. So you just got to be mindful of that. So it's a small pub, but that, yes, it definitely called the Grenadier and Wilton Close, but you'll find it anyway. But it'll be closed at the moment anyway because we're on lockdown.
Thank you. So before we go, where can we find you? What have you got coming up? Any particular link?
Well, you can always find us on Facebook. The website's called spookyowls.com. We're also on, so you can look there and you'll find all our thing there. We've also got a YouTube channel which we've been running for a few years, but over lockdown, I've been doing a lot more interviews with people. Lots of hauntings, a bit similar to what you do yourself, but we do sort of single subject kind of conversations. We've had talks with lots of ghost hunters from around the country and other different peoples. But that's on YouTube, so just look up Spooky Owls. If you look up Spooky Owls on Google, you'll find us on Twitter, you'll find us on Instagram, you'll find us everywhere. So, and you'll be able to see some of the things we've done. And we've also published books. You were talking about witches before. Our most recent book was called Shadow of Pendle, which is a collection of fictional stories regarding the Pendle witch trials. That's fictional. We've also got the Spooky Owls Book of Horror, which are horrors based on folk tales of Britain and Ireland. We've also did 2 books, one called Dracula's Midnight Snacks, which is basically vampire fiction, and we did Zombie Bites, which was zombie fiction. So, but you'll find all that information on there. It's just Spooky Owls is basically a celebration of ghosts and horror in the UK and Ireland, and you'll see it all there. So come along and say good day.
Thank you so much. Well, we come to the end, and thank you for everyone that joined us. Thank you for anyone that's going to watch after we have gone live. Thank you so much, David, for joining us. It's been really good talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kerry Ann. Thank you, Sarah. And glad to see you back doing this. I look forward to seeing some more of your interviews.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully more interesting than mine, I'm sure.
You've been very interesting. Thank you so much for talking.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Right,
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay. Good night, everyone.